Hi everyone, good afternoon. How is everyone going today? Today, to join me for another live AMA is Ash Phillips, the founder of Dffrnt, but also angel investor for Dffrnt. I have so many questions about everything you've been up to because your LinkedIn is very busy and you have been involved in many things, so that's super exciting. Before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone that you can ask your own question whatever platform you're using. So if you're watching from YouTube, LinkedIn Live, Twitch, Twitter, simply drop a message on the chat to ask your question or even just to say hi. That's also pretty nice, right? To see who's around. Also, big thank you to everyone supporting these AMAs and special thoughts to Yinch, Andrea, Roy and Zappa who are monthly supporting me on my Buy Me a Coffee page. That really means a lot to me. I think that's about it for me. I don't want to, ramble too much as we get started. So, Ash, if you're ready, let's get this AMA going. Good to have
Already,
you.
let's go.
You have the floor. What about we start with you telling us a bit more about you, your background, your company, and your own entrepreneurial journey?
Where do you start? It's tough, isn't it? Thank you for having me, first and foremost. Really appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I love the content you're producing. It's awesome. And I think it's really great. Don't know whether you saw the other day, but I definitely watched some of your Tomb Raider stream as well. I thought that was awesome. Big gaming fan here, and I'm sure we'll get into that later. But yeah, I'm Ash. Thanks for having me. And for anybody tuning in, I run a company called Dffrnt primarily. And Dffrnt is essentially a startup ecosystem by subscription, and that's like a whole load of jargon. What does that really mean? Well, running a business is lonely, it's difficult, and there are bits of support out there, but often you have to apply to be part of it, or you have to pay a large amount of money to be part of it, or you have to be based somewhere specific. And that really kind of bugged me that the vast majority of people weren't getting the support they needed. So started Dffrnt, and now we provide an accelerator like experience or a startup support system for anyone, anywhere, building any kind of business. And that's what we do. And then, because I like to have fingers in pies and I get bored really easily, I was lucky enough and humbled to be asked to be part of the angel investing program with Ada Ventures last year, which meant that I got the experience to invest somebody else's money, which is a really surreal experience, into 5 different companies on top of one that I already did with Ecology, shouting them out. And have essentially become kind of an angel investor as part of that program too. So yeah, we do lots at Dffrnt, but mostly it's just like supporting the next generation to start and grow their own companies.
Okay, so I feel that's kind of two different things. So let's first talk about your own company. You talk about accelerators, and that's actually funny because when we go onto your website, the first thing that you can read is that it's an alternative to accelerators. And what's your views on accelerators? Because we're both startup founders, but we're also both very involved in the startup ecosystem, and we see a lot of accelerators. Some are great, and we also see founders who are a bit lost and try to apply to every accelerator or kind of have a stem from everyone in London. What's your thoughts on accelerators?
It's a really good time to ask that question after for anybody who's a big Twitter fan like I am, you'll have seen possibly the fallout of the Stripe YC Twitter mob kind of narrative that's going around at the moment. Whether I agree with it or not is a different question. But accelerators in general mean well. They're set up to do good generally, you would hope. For anybody who doesn't know what they are essentially program-based experiences where you go along with an idea usually, or at least a business that may have just started, and they will guide you through a process of growing that and turning it into something that hopefully makes money. But a lot of the time they are commercially driven by investment vehicles. So what they want to do is they'll give you some money, they'll take a cut of your company and they'll grow. And that's also fine. And so you start looking into things like the terms and the agreements, and also the way that they're rewarded for success, both PR-wise and commercially, is driving you to raise more money and more money and more money. And so whilst they're generally, I would hope, set up to do good things in most cases, run by great moral people. Sometimes what happens is the system rewards the wrong metrics and it rewards the wrong kind of activity. And so people become really competitive and start raising huge amounts of money for businesses that don't necessarily need it or want it. And the challenge is that they define a lot of the narrative. You know, the YC stamp of approval is so strong that just having those two letters in your Twitter bio will probably help you raise more money. And that sounds amazing for the people that get in. But I don't know what the statistics are now, but it's probably something like 1 in 1,000 get in and everybody else gets a no. And the problem is when you get a no from them, and then you get a no from the next one, and then you get a no from the next one, and it happens time and time again, the motivation to run a company drops. And it's just crazy to me to think about how many people may have stopped because someone somewhere said that they weren't going to make it. But who are they to say that that's not going to be a real company? You know, it's very subjective. So what do I think of accelerators?
They are quite generalist, so they don't really have the industry focus that you may have and the insight you may have.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I guess that's another conversation around specialty versus generalism. Like Dffrnt is sector agnostic, stage agnostic, age agnostic, geography agnostic, but on purpose, because I realize that there's a real power in connecting people across those borders, geographically, sector-wise, circumstance-wise, because then we can create real social mobility and international trade and a whole bunch of really cool things that you see cross-sector. Whereas putting 10 fintech companies into one accelerator creates inherent potential crossover collaboration opportunities too, but also potential competition. And actually where someone might see a massive innovation opportunity, they might hesitate because that company over there is already doing it. So, and that was part of the YC kind of Stripe conversation that was open on Twitter recently. So yeah, there's some, I've got hesitations about them, which is why I wanted to create an alternative. They're not wrong inherently. They are good by default. But the vast majority of people are underserved, and I wanted to make sure the rest of the people were looked after, and that's where Dffrnt was born.
So what does Dffrnt really looks like? I have been part of the community for a few months a while ago. I'm sure it has evolved. I mean, it's constantly evolving, right? So what does it look like as a founder when you join your community? And also, how do you... So through an online community, how do you address the same thing as an accelerator would? Because an accelerator has a curriculum, right? So how do you help people understand what they need? Because I think that's the main thing of accelerator, because they force you to go through a specific curriculum. You realize what you're not covering yet, and that can help in that sense for first-time founder especially. How do you cover that?
Yeah, so I guess that's why I would describe this as an alternative to, as opposed to actually one, which is, you know, the curriculum piece for me isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all process. And that's the thing that I guess I jar against. You know, they're going to be taking anywhere between, I guess at the lowest level, probably 2%, up to the highest level, probably 15% of your company for running you through a program which is designed to be a one-size-fits-all in everybody in that program, which should be good, should be great. But that doesn't serve people who want to go a bit slower. It doesn't serve people who want to serve a different industry or a different market, and therefore doesn't become as relevant. Whereas the alternative for Dffrnt is, rather than take 2% or 15%, or more likely to be somewhere like 5 to 7% of your company that hopefully very quickly is worth at least, let's say, £1 million. So, you know, relatively speaking, you're paying 50 grand to be part of a program. Dffrnt charges £12 a month to be accessing all of the other softer bits that an accelerator would provide you with, that you wouldn't have sat on the sofa working away on your own, but without the forcefulness of a program to say you have to be here learning this at any given time. So what do we actually provide? We give them access to a global community of other people building really interesting things. They get access to on-demand support, so they can ask questions about business whenever they want, and they'll get personalized video responses, usually from me, to the answers to those questions. They're supposed to be a couple of minutes. I get carried away sometimes and end up doing whole 20-minute workshop answers to people's questions. They're getting way too much value for that. I should put the price up, but still. They get access to resident advisors, so legal, accounting, well-being, HR support we have from trusted partners in the community who can answer questions I can't because I'm not qualified to. They're available on demand within a reasonable response time. Deals and offers, so I think our toolbox is now worth about £300,000. If you use it all, none of our startups will ever use the whole toolbox, but generally speaking, they'll save more than their membership and then some by using the toolbox on its own, and that becomes a cash positive experience. And that's generally all of it. But as you mentioned quite rightly, it's important for me to say I'm a founder too. The company is Dffrnt is a company I run, and I'm learning all the time about what people want. And actually, weirdly, it sounds wrong to say it this way around, because people are usually trying to add more. I'm actually trying to figure out what I can strip away to make the few things that remain the best possible they can be, rather than keep adding things just to make up for probably imposter syndrome that I might have, to be honest.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because I've been through a number of accelerators, not necessarily the big accelerators, and only 3 accelerators. No one took our equity for that, but every time still I found that it adds more work. And if you really done one, you know what you need to do, you know what they're going to ask you to do, and it's not necessarily relevant to you right now. So it's I completely understand that sometimes you just want more flexibility, just to ask what you really are interested in right now. It can be interesting to know what people expect, and what path you're supposed to take, but I think it's also good to know the rules, to know what rules to break too also. um,
True.
on talking about what founders need, here on the AMAs we have quite often questions focusing on monetization, but also getting customers and fundraising challenges. That kind of the questions that are coming quite often. What are the recurring themes and the founders pain point that you see at the moment?
At the moment, I guess, like there's a big zeitgeist about well-being, to be honest. It's kind of front and center for a lot of people. Statistically, I believe, I mean, I never remember what source I have for this, but founders are more likely to be subject to depression and anxiety than any other subcategory of people, within reason. I'm sure there are others. But we hear a lot about men between the age of 18 and 35 being subject to things like that. Founders are by percentage subjected to even more. And that is kind of self-applied, because we put ourselves in that position in the first place, if we are founders by opportunity, not by necessity, which also exists, I should say. But it means that we have to be considering what we're doing all the time. And I think there's a change in culture that's happening right now between what used to be, I guess, is now considered hustle porn. You have to work 24 hours a day. You should be doing this. If you're not doing it, you're not working. The Gary V's of old. But now there's a change of like more of a well-being culture. How are you looking after yourself? And for me, with my investor hat on, I want to see a founder that looks after themselves, because a good business is run by a healthy founding team. If the founding team aren't healthy and they're driving themselves into the ground, and that business has a certain lifespan, because those people do too.
Yes.
So that's something that's important, and it goes away from the quantifiable, like how much money have you raised, all of the boring administrative conversations, and talks about the softer stuff. So that's something that's important. But the other thing, I guess, coming back to the funding piece, is that the narrative, certainly on Twitter, I would say, and LinkedIn, and if you're looking up startup stuff, a lot of startup stuff is defined by fundraising. TechCrunch is just article after article about company has raised this much money, well done. We're celebrating fundraising like it's the goal, but it's not. Fundraising is a mechanic that gets us to the goal. And that alienates people that are bootstrapping, which, for people who don't know, bootstrapping is, building a company without the money and using the money you've made to reinvest back into your company. It downplays that, whereas actually that's possibly arguably even more admirable, because you haven't needed to use money to get to where you're going. That's incredible. You've raised money from your customers. Cool. But the danger I see is that the fundraising narrative is pushing valuations up. It's making fundraising competitive. People are doing it. You're not successful unless you've raised more money than the next person. And we're ending up building, as a culture, companies that are just fallacies. WeWork's a good example. Huge valuation that dropped at IPO, and it's dropped again since. And there are countless other companies that are examples of that, which is fun, exciting, cool, but dangerous for job creation, because you have to let people go when you stop making as much money. And I'm worried that we're in a little bubble that might burst sometime soon, but we'll see.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. And I think the media has also some responsibility on that. I mean, how many times did I say that I wanted to see something else on Crunch, on TechCrunch than just, white men raising X amount of money? There's not that many alternatives, right? You want to read the news, you want to know who is interesting in the tech scene right now, and you just can't find anything else. So that's feels like that's the only way to measure success, and that's definitely not. Especially as we know, VC money doesn't cover every kind of business models or every kind of businesses. So Yinch on the chat says that it's good to see that burnout has become less acceptable as the cost of startupping, and he also says, does Dffrnt help bootstrapping startups, and how?
Sorry, what was the last part of the question?
How do you help bootstrapping startups, specifically people who are bootstrapping?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, first and foremost, Dffrnt is agnostic, so we'll help people that are fundraising and people that aren't. But what that means is that we help with the fundamentals, right? I guess obviously as a service, we help people by answering their business questions. So I'll just do that whether they're bootstrapping or not. That's the real answer from a product point of view. But how could and would I help bootstrapping startups versus fundraising companies as an advisor, which I do a fair bit as well? Is by just enabling them to understand how to build a business in the first place. That's the thing that bugs me, is that bootstrappers often don't get access to those accelerator programs, and so they don't get access to the same type of advice. So, the universal truths are true. You need to market if you're running a business, funded or not. You need to know how to sell if you're running a business, funded or not. You need to know how to build a team, funded or not. And so just making sure that education around what you should be doing, how you should be doing it, whether you're funded or not, is available to everybody, I guess, is the answer to that. But I think the one thing that bootstrappers have the ability to do once you're making just about enough money to survive is to actually take a breather, which is amazing, because people that fundraise tend to be on a path, a train of like, raise money, raise more money, keep raising money until maybe at some point something sticks. Whereas as soon as you can raise enough money from your customers in revenue, recurring ideally, then you can pay your bills. And that's so liberating, because then you're like, well, worst case scenario, I don't need to do anything anymore. We just do what we do for the current customers, and that's amazing. And there are so many VC-backed founders that would be jealous of that, because
Yes.
they're having to hit new targets all day, every day. It's easy to become complacent, but that's a different problem, and we cross that bridge when we come to it. But yeah, bootstrappers just need to remember one thing, that business, and everybody, to be honest, needs to remember one thing, that business is fundamentally selling something. Ideally selling something for more than it costs. That's it. Everything else is just noise. So if you're bootstrapping, just go and sell something. It's easy.
I wish it was that easy. I mean, I'm bootstrapping, so yeah, I can tell on that it's not that easy.
Yeah, I know.
Also, so when we look at Dffrnt, I guess the main competition would be existing communities, right? You have a bunch of online communities. Certainly too many, because I realized that there has been some kind of boom at the start of COVID where everyone was trying to move their community online. And then it was active for maybe 3 months during the lockdown, and then suddenly it's quiet. Nothing is going on. I'm almost tempted sometimes to put a message there saying, "Hey, is anyone still around?"
Yeah, I've got like 10 Slack groups that I'm part of that are the same, really. And yeah, there is a lot of noise in communities. We were one of the first communities, I guess, that existed, born out of meetups. We started as a meetup group that grew and eventually got to the point where, built that virtual experience. And now everybody else has a virtual experience. But yes, that's the challenge, is figuring out, okay, what differentiates you? And this is a story for all businesses. What differentiates you versus the competition? And that's a constant challenge for me, is, okay, are we better? Are we more narrow in a certain space? Is there something about us that attracts people versus others? We charge. Some people don't. But what does charging actually really do? Well, it gives us some capability to provide some better support than a free community or forum might, which might be really unruly and therefore actually, without moderation, just die after time. Whereas ours can't because I'm still here, right? If it does get quiet anytime, which it does at certain times of the year, summer, people are on holiday, Christmas, people aren't working, whatever. I can still jump in and say, hey, how's everybody doing? What are we doing? Do you need any help? And that's basically what Dffrnt is. In a nutshell, we're providing a virtual co-founder that you don't have to give equity to. That's what I want people to treat us as. It's that just check in with us. If you're ever having a sleepless night or you've got a challenge that you can't really quite figure out, rather than sitting on the sofa Googling stuff and not knowing if it's the right answer, you can turn to a whole community of peers that will have that answer for you. And luckily, they're all really nice people as well. So that's good too.
Yeah, it kind of brings a filter, right? It kind of puts some filter, which is good, because problem of big free communities that it's huge, but no one is really reactive or creating a personal relationship. Do you think that the pandemic has created more gaps or new gaps for entrepreneurs? Because you mentioned doing meetups, and before the pandemic, I used to go to networking events, meeting people, trying to expand my network at least twice a week, I'd say. And it was way too much. And when the lockdown happened, I realized how good it felt just to be focusing on what we're doing. Not trying to just go to event because I feel obligated to go there, and kind of a FOMO thing, where you really have a fear of missing out, fear of not meeting the person that you could have met there. So I think it's kind of an opportunity more than a gap. But I'm wondering if you've seen any other things like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think in times of like hardship, it forces innovation. Obviously, a pandemic isn't something anybody saw coming. Tried to build a business model that would survive anything, which luckily it just about has. But I never saw that coming either. I was just trying to create a business that was sustainable. And when we moved online, it was easier than most. It wasn't easy, but it was easier than most people found, I think, because I was already kind of prepped. But
yeah.
It means that lots of companies have had to force their innovation over time. Like we've got members that operate in the FMCG space, selling products, wine, gin, snacks and goods, and having conversations with them about how they had to come up with brand new ways of operating meant that they've come up with new lines, new products, new approaches. And as restrictions and the COVID culture, I guess, that we were in for 2 years starts to ease, touch wood, they get to maintain that innovation whilst going back to a refined version of what they were doing before, which means hopefully the upside is great. Now, obviously, my hearts go out to everybody that wasn't able to survive that period and did have to close shop, because there were lots of those people. But yeah, I think it's meant that people have focused on new things, as well as deepening their kind of efforts on things that were working. Like our events, we ran 100 a year, 21 cities, 9 countries, 4,500 people a year coming along, all completely free. The assumption was that was enough brand awareness that it would drive membership. Mm-hmm. They weren't really. And so I never had a good excuse to turn the events off to figure out what would happen to our membership if we stopped them. COVID happened, really good excuse to turn your events off. And we did, and it didn't affect membership. So now I'm sat here going, should we really go back to running 4,500 people's worth of events every single year if they're not really going to have that much impact on our bottom line? Impact-wise, I want to. The world needs it. It deserves it. But if it's not going to impact as a business, should we? And if we do, how do we make it impact our business? So it's just forcing all that efficiency. And then I guess, the final piece on this is that people are finding new opportunities and new spaces. I've seen so many more content creators over the last 2 years. We're doing it right now. People are finding their voice, because when you can't go out there and show them yourself in person, what are we gonna do to get that out there? And this is it for you. And I'm exploring doing it too. So it'll be fun to see more of that over the coming years. TikTok, we all know, is just booming right now. It's ridiculous.
I'm not on it, so I'm kind of protected from that.
Same, I'm not on it either. Maybe we should get on it and challenge each other, see who can get to the most followers as fast as possible. We'll see.
We have a question on the chat, still kind of the topic of COVID. Have you noticed any recruitment shortage post lockdown for you or any company part of Dffrnt?
No, I don't think so. It's really interesting question. Different is me. It's just me. So, one job to fill and one person in it. So we're at 100% capacity. That works really nicely. I've seen obviously no shortage of talent because people are out there looking for roles, but I don't think, and maybe this is a privilege piece, maybe this is a sheltered piece where I'm not seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is possibly biased, but I don't think I've seen people missing out on jobs. I think what I have seen more, and again, it might be confirmation bias, but just like I'm seeing more announcements of people moving into new roles that they seem to just be enjoying even more than they ever have. Because I guess what happened with COVID is it gave them an excuse to look around, and it changed their current company culture where
Yes.
they were actually at home going, well, what do I really love about my job? Because if it is the people, then, that puts the rest of the job into question. And maybe I could go and find great people in a better role somewhere else. So I've seen people moving into roles, but I don't think I've seen a shortage of the roles for the people to get. So yeah, however, having said that, we do have a jobs board in the community. I don't promote it well enough, so it's not a good indicator, but we didn't have really any job postings during COVID that much. And I've had 2 go up, I think, in the last week. So is that an indicator? I don't know. It might just be fluke. But yeah, I guess all of those bits add together and tell me I don't think I saw that much impact, but statistics might say otherwise.
I think it's actually maybe not within startup that's the best way to measure these kind of things, because there are so many other ways, so many other things that actually influence whether a startup is in a position to hire people or not. That I find that it's something maybe more visible at a corporate environment maybe.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah.
Talking a bit more about your other activities, talking about investment, kind of the other side of the table. So I'm myself a scout for backed VC, but the approach to VC scouting is quite different from the way you're doing it with Adas, I think. So can you tell us a bit more about what it's like to be a scout with Adas Venture? What does this mean? Does it mean that people should be reaching out to you for specific type of checks, or how does it look like?
Sure. So, Ada Ventures is a venture capital fund. They're funded to the tune of, I think it was at the last close, around 50 million UK pounds. And will continue to raise more funds in future, I'm sure. They invest in underrepresented, overlooked founders in underrepresented, overlooked markets, ideally. And obviously, that's what they're going to be looking for. They recognize at the highest level that they're 2 white middle-class GPs of the fund. And so they're only really going to get deal flow from people that look quite a lot like them. Which means that they're naturally probably not going to be underrepresented and overlooked, the people they're going to reach. So to counter this, what they did was, and one of the GPs at Ada is Czech Warner, who's the founder of Diversity VC, which is a movement in VC to help balance the inequalities that exist in venture capital, both from funders and funding sides. But yeah, so what Ada did was they said, hey, look, if we're not going to be able to find the right deal flow that does allow us to deliver on our mission, we will enable other people to do so. And so they came up with the Scout model. And the Scout model is, at Ada at least, because I'm not sure how it works at Backed, it's basically a way to tell somebody who has a community where they might be seeing people raising money regularly, semi-regularly, to send that deal flow to Ada Ventures. If they end up investing in it, then they will pay you for that deal flow. And they'll pay you up to a percentage of the deal, up to, I think it's a total of £5,000, and which you can take in cash and or invest in the deal. So basically what they're doing is they're enabling people that may not have any money to spot really good things that they would love to invest in, don't have the capability to do so, of which I was one of them, and invest in them and create a portfolio if they want to, or take the cash and go on holiday, do what they need to do, pay some bills. So that was cool. But then they doubled down last year, the year before last, with the angel program, which is what I was lucky to get on. And there were 5 angels who they took £250,000 of their total fund. So 0.5% of their total fund size, generally, I'd say. It might have been just under 1% at the time. And spread it across 5 different people, 50K each, invest in, on average, 5 deals each. So £10,000 checks into really early stage companies. And the deal there is that we get to build up our track record with somebody else's money, with money that we would otherwise not be able to invest in companies. Ada and Exchange get access to 25 on average early stage deals that would be too small for them to be able to do deals in because they're investing £500,000 a time usually. They get to invest in really cool founders that they might not actually also invest in themselves because they're in spaces that I understand that they don't, gaming being one of them. So that's generally how that works. Hopefully that explains the model.
It does, yes. And actually, I didn't get the difference between the Angel and the Scout program. I think I just missed the news when they announced the Angel program. So I was still on the Scout. I was like, oh, that's pretty nice. This doesn't work. It works like the Scouting program is the same with Backed, more or less. It's more about introducing founders. More than investing, but it's good that Ada also has this angel program like Atomico, I think does also. Yeah. So I think it's a great opportunity both for the people who are joining, because that enables you to do angel investment without having necessarily your own money dedicated to that, or the ability to invest your own money. And in the same time, for the funds, it's a fantastic opportunity to do deals that are completely outside of what they usually do and what they will usually see also. What's your specific areas? What are your main thing? You mentioned gaming, and I know you're a gamer. We already had some chat on that, and I love to see more gamers in the founders ecosystem. What are the other areas, and what kind of businesses really you're looking into?
Yeah, so I started off quite generalist because I wasn't really sure. They put us through a program and helped us cut our teeth a little bit and really narrow down a little bit, but wasn't too sure because my job generally is to cheerlead everybody in the community. So like it would have been really easy for me to just go, like the Oprah meme, just you take some money, give money to everyone. But that's obviously not a great investment strategy. So, statistically it might be, who knows? But yeah, so I started off with B2B SaaS, so business software, because that's classically quite boring now because everybody does that. But it's mainly because I manage, so many businesses in our community that I get to see the gaps of where they're underserved, the tools they might need, the things they're frustrated about. And I'm like, actually, if I can spot a gap here, then somebody's building it, and then maybe I can fund that because it's helping them. So that was where I started. My background's in marketing and brand agencies, and so I understand brand positioning quite well. And so brand was a special piece for me that wasn't the reason I would invest, because the service has to be good. But I think people are likely as consumers to buy something that looks great but doesn't work very well, more so than something that is perfect, that just is very ugly and they've never seen before. That's not to say people should build average products and just put really nice brands on them. But, we've all bought this, well, I haven't, but we've all bought the same Apple phone for the last 5 years and they haven't really changed it that much apart from putting an extra camera on the back. So that was a key piece for me, was brand. Community was an extra piece, a special piece for me, because of course I run one, I get it very deeply. And so people that were building infrastructure for community, something in and around there would have been really nice. And I put that out there as a piece of my thesis. And then, gaming and infrastructure in that space was something that I realized a few things. One, I grew up a gamer, I still am one, so I understand the space deeply. I've done 10 years in startups and business, so I understand that space pretty deeply. There aren't actually that many people that I know of that overlap in those two spaces that would actively invest. Maybe I can be one of them. And so that's where I doubled down and was able to do 2 deals and sadly miss out on one as part of my 5 deals in that kind of space. So, yeah.
So more gaming infrastructure, no games. Because that's actually two very different things. It's funny that you mentioned the gaming industry. I feel that a lot of people in the gaming ecosystem, they create studios, like content studios, to create games, and quite often these people don't really understand the investment and ecosystem, or they're less aware of the ecosystem. Like tech startup usually have been really prepared for that. But there's a big gap between building a tech startup in gaming and building a studio, a game studio.
Yeah, that was, for me, investing in games is like, probably like, I have no experience in this, but you hear it from people, it's like investing in a film. You just don't really know what's going to go well and what's not, unless it's a AAA. And if it is AAA, they don't need my money anyway. You know, like Call of Duty, for me, from a technical point of view, is a terrible game, but it does well because they've got the marketing behind it. Battlefield, the recent release, like, also terrible, and EA have now come out and said it wasn't quite what we thought it was going to be, and it's like, yeah, we all know they wouldn't have needed my money because they're EA. But you know, on the indie side, maybe there are some bits of IP that would be interesting, but it's so subjective. Just because I love that art style or that character development or that story doesn't mean everybody else is going to. You have to be a very special kind of person to understand the common denominators that everybody's going to love, and that's too risky for me. What I do understand, though, is the way that people would experience platforms and how, or what I think I understand, it's all bets, obviously, at the end of the day, and how that impacts their usage, and would they take it up, and is the fundamental concept of the product a good idea? So the two companies that I did deals in via Ada, I think they're both public now. One is a company called PlayerState, and PlayerState basically connects AAA games publishers and the like with the communities of said games, on the basis of needing creative work done and enabling their communities to help with that creative work, either paying them in cash and or in game currency and items. And so what you're doing is you're taking gamers who are classically very creative people who are probably pretty handy with a computer and saying, rather than paying a big agency loads of money to do some cell shading on our latest advert, we're going to let you do it, come up with new character creations for us and new stories for us, and we're going to pay you for that. People buy more into the game. And I was like, that concept just makes sense. I love it, because I've got so many ideas for skins on Call of Duty that they'll never think about, which I would love to put in front of them, you know? So that was one concept. And the other one, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about yet. I think I can. I'll take the risk. It's a company called Custom Use, and Custom Use basically allows people to create their customized digital assets for their favorite virtual worlds. So I could create a virtual custom hoodie for or skin for Roblox or Minecraft, for example, and you can do that already, but it's really difficult and really complex. Whereas their platform is very drag and drop. Just drag and drop it and upload it into the game, and you are wearing your own outfit and item, which is cool. But at scale, the exciting thing for me is the ability to, and I'm not bullish on crypto or NFTs, but the ability to potentially mint those items, have them as unique items, and then turn those into sellable pieces of product later on. So those are the two that I did. And hopefully that goes some way to show why infrastructure for me sounds more exciting, because they're fundamental new businesses. Whereas if somebody just said, I want to make a new game, a new battle royale, I'm just like, I don't know what's going to make this one win versus
I wish
others.
there were more people looking at the tech aspect, you know, building myself a very technical, you know, part of gaming. But yeah, it's interesting to see the difference, and I think more founders in the gaming ecosystem should just ask the question straightforward. It will save them time. Ask the investors, do invest in studios content or do invest in the tech, because the answer is, it's like hardware companies. Not many VCs won't touch hardware, so just the best way to know is just ask the question. And clearly, if that's not something they're going to go near to, they're going to tell you straight away. Do you think that being a founder really changes things in the way you approach investment? Do you think that maybe because you're a founder, you have maybe different criteria, there's different things that make you tick?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. I think that's the thing that I realize now more than anything, on the other side of the curtain, as it were, that VCs, no offense to Matt and Chet, because they're very smart people, they know their stuff, they're brilliant investors, But a lot of VCs and most VCs, if not all VCs, are just making bets and making educated bets. And as people that have never run companies, most of the time, there's only so much kind of context they can add to a bet. That's sometimes a good thing because there's no emotional attachment usually. So they can look top down really objectively, will this work in this market? They're not delusional about anything, whereas a founder will often be. However, arguably, you need to have some of that delusion to bring that to life. And it would be nice if your investors did too, so they can champion it. So for me as a founder that, had the ability to do some investing and hopefully will go on to do more, it did bring up some special cases and some special parts of my thesis for me. One was that initially I wanted to invest in everybody because I knew the struggle they were going through. I wanted to give them money to go. Then came up with a countermeasure for that, which was, I forgot what I called it now, but it's kind of like my offset, my excitement period. I can't remember what I called it. I had a neat title for it now. But basically, the whole aim of it was to know and acknowledge that I'm going to be excited about what they're doing, at least for a few hours after the call, by default, every single person. But then if I leave it a day or two, and I'll still try and get back to them as soon as possible, I'll leave it a day or two. And then if I'm still excited a few days later, that's telling me something. I need to figure out what that is, but it's telling me something. And then I'll go back to them and have a conversation. If I'm not, then it's not saying they're a bad business. It's just saying I'm not the right investor for them because they want someone who should be excited about what they're building. And if I'm not, then cool. So that's one thing. The other bit that I realized I was quite passionate about was solo founders, because investors, especially VCs and institutional investors, will want you to have a co-founder for good reason. Strengths, weaknesses, you want to balance that out. But also, as someone who's had previous co-founders and seen all the benefits that brings, it also does bring challenges. And some of those challenges are compromise, which equals slowness of speed, which as an early stage startup, you need speed. If it's just you can go fast as hell. And that whole adage of like, go far, go together, go fast, go alone. I think there is a time to go alone and go fast. And those people are slightly underserved. And for me, as a founder, acting as an investor, I can give them that virtual co-founder experience, personally at least, if not via Dffrnt, obviously, that gives them everything a co-founder would probably bring to the table without actually making them give up 50% of their company. So go and build something, do it really fast. If you have a bad day, come and chat to me, cool. And just keep going. And a lot of investors wouldn't invest in those people because it's just one of them. So solo founders and being championing everyone by default, both challenges, but things that I think I've got a bit of a strategy for now.
We actually have an interesting follow-up question on that on the chat. Is it an aspect of traditional VCs that they are more excited about making money and not so much in the specific passions of the founders? That's an interesting question.
It is, and sadly the answer is yes, but excited probably wouldn't necessarily be the right word. Necessary is the right word. So the thing that I think people forget and don't realize, because VC is this mysterious thing that like no one really understands, is that venture capitalists are essentially kind of rich people managing very rich people's money. Those very rich people want to invest in cool things and diversify their portfolio, and the VCs are the middlemen. They're the people who manage that money and say, I'm going to make some really good bets with your cash, and I'm going to put it into the right places. Now, it's really difficult for venture capitals or institutional funds to make a return on their money. Statistically, most of them will fail, just like startups. So if you're going to manage £10 million and put it into startups, they better be amazing. And there's also statistics and data that says, like 1 in 20 companies will win. So you need to make 20 bets in companies that are going to be so big that they will return enough money back to your fund to make up for the 19 losses that you just made on the others that died, and give your very rich friends who gave you the money in the first place a chunk of money back. So what happens is VCs aren't excited about it. Well, they are excited about making money. Everybody is generally, if you're a capitalist. But what they're doing is they need to do that because you're running a VC fund. You won't know whether any of your work worked, by the way, until like 5 to 10 to 15 years later. So you're making bets right now. They better be the biggest possible bets you can make, which is why if you go with an average story or an average size company or something a little bit under the radar to most VCs, you probably won't get the money. And that's the challenge. That's what I, as a support for founders, try to educate people on, so that they understand, one, the dynamics. Why is the VC doing this, and how can I get inside their mind? Turn up to the meeting excited to the point of almost delusion in my own company, so that I can convince them why the world's going to be a better place with my product. And the final piece on that actually is a good shout out to Czech, who wrote an article on this on Medium. I can never remember the title, but if you Google Czech Warner Medium fund economics, something like that on Google, you should find it. And basically it talks about the unit economics of a fund and how the finances of a fund work. And it's really transparent, and it helps you read it and go, oh, that's why VCs want 30% of my company. Oh, that's why they'll only invest in my friend who says he's going to make £1 billion versus me, who might only make 10 million. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question that they have.
I think it does answer really well. And, I also believe that it's great to explain exactly how VC works, and every founder that at some point think about raising external funding should really look into how a VC fund work. And also, yes, you do have some shark out there. You do have people who are very aggressive, who are going to give you very aggressive terms. But the only way to really avoid that and to navigate this ecosystem is to understand how it works. Because, as you say, it could also explain why some founders have really a good idea and a good thing to get started, but it's just not a fit for the expectation of a VC. And, I wish in an ideal world that venture capital were there to fund innovation, to fund very exciting things, but it's not the case. And even when they're going to say in the thesis that they're going to fund things that are pushing things further and very innovative idea, in the end it's all about de-risking the bet, right? Because that's a business that they are running. That's not a charity or a grant or something like that. So it's sometimes when you're a founder, you're really passionate about what you do. Well, most of the time, I hope you are. But you're really passionate about what you do. It's hard to take a step back. And when you pitch to VCs because you think that's the way to go, and you receive a big no, and some kind of vague answer and vague feedback, it's important to understand that maybe it wasn't the right fit, maybe just this fund wasn't the right fit, or maybe your company doesn't really fit really well with VCs right now, and if you want to go for VCs, maybe your business model will need to change, or some approach need to change, or you may find another path to go there. It's just maybe not for you.
Yeah, there's some good examples of that though, where like I've had conversations with VCs before and tried to send somebody from our community to them, and they've gone, no, this doesn't work because I've seen something exactly like this, and then I've asked them what it is, and they've shown me it, and it's a completely different business in a completely different space. And the problem is that they're viewing it through their lens, and I think that is the story for founders to take away, is that if you are getting a no from a VC, it might just be because they just don't understand your space. They might be boomers and not really get what you're building in this space at this time. And every VC that's been in the industry long enough will have a story of the 1 or 2 or 3 companies they missed. I missed out on Uber. I missed out on whatever it might be. And you are very possibly one of those. So, every no you get is a chance to say, hate to say I told you so in 5 years' time when you build a successful company. That's the way I'd like to see it anyway.
Yes. And it's also an opportunity to test out your narrative, because sometimes it's not about the business, it's just about how you present it. And that doesn't mean your slides or anything, but just the way you explain your journey, the way you explain your business model, the way you justify everything, especially if you're doing something a bit technical or something that requires to have an understanding, a deep understanding of how things work today. It can be a good exercise.
Yeah, I was going to say a good way of doing this, by the way, top tip for everybody is to get someone to explain your business back to you.
Yes.
Because as a founder, you know so much about it, you want to tell everybody every little bit. And by the time you finish explaining it, people are like, what? Whereas if you get someone else to explain what you do back to you, often their pitch is going to be way better for VCs because they get it, they understand it, and it's the common denominator. It's a high level version of what you do. Play with it. If you're a founder and you've not done that before, definitely recommend it. It's really interesting.
Me too. We have a question on the chat. Is it a common mistake? What is the common mistake that startups make when thinking about funding? And also, are people making any mistake when they reach out to you, maybe some cold email reaching out to you because they see angel investment and immediately just drop you the deck?
Yeah. First thing, first question there. Yeah, there is a mistake that I see people make a lot of the time with funding, and it's not thinking about the bigger picture before they go into it. Lots of people think about what mistakes going to make with funding, and they start thinking about spreadsheets and stuff straight away, or like, what can I do with my pitch deck wrong? And I'm like, no, you're going too deep already. What we need to be thinking about is the end goal. Why are you building this business in the first place? And if building the business to get rich, let's say, like a lot of the time now it'll be about impact, and that's fine, but also hopefully you want to make some money. You're building the business to make a certain amount of money, then when you sell that company, you need to have X amount of that company worth X amount of money to be able to make that amount of money back. Yeah. So let's use round figures. If you want to make £10 million, then you need 100% of a £10 million company when you sell it. Or you need 10% of a £100 million company when you sell it, because those two are the ways that you're going to get £10 million, or let's say 33% of a £30 million company. And the maths continues. What you could do from there is start to figure out, okay, how much can I afford to give away of the company right now? How many rounds of funding will we need to get to the point at which it will be able to be sold for that amount of money? And how much do I dilute at that point? Because my ultimate worry, and I've seen articles about this multiple times, is that people over dilute their equity.
Yes.
They give away 30% in the first round, and they give away 25% to a friend in the next round. And, by the time the sale of the company comes, you've got $1 billion company. It's amazing, but you own 0.1% of it yourself. And what was the point in doing that? And so, yeah, that's the important thing.
It can also limit your fundraising ability later on. So if you give away too much equity at an early stage, then other VCs will realize that you won't have enough equity to really go to your end goal, and they won't invest. So you're like going to be stuck with existing investors that are going to pest you so you can raise more money. But as soon as you try raising more money, you realize that because you've given away too much equity, you just can't. So you're stuck in this really, I guess, unnecessary and uncomfortable position.
And the journey ends sometimes at that point.
Yeah.
But that's actually a really good point, because that's a really good indicator of a good investor. If someone comes along and tries to take too much of the company, they care more about themselves and less about the eventuality of the company, then they should, because they should be investing in a company that's run by you to build a great company. And so, Matt and Czech will do this all the time, where it's just like, if we invest, we want a good chunk of the company, because the unit economics in that article, as explained, need to be quite chunky to give us our money back. But they've already diluted X. If we take that chunk off of them, they're not going to have enough interest in the company to care enough about building it into what we want it to be. So yeah, it becomes a real catch-22. And you're right, sometimes you end up at a point where you're just stuck and you can't go any further, and you either run it forever more and the state it's in, or you stop and start again, and that's sad. So that's that. And then what was the second part of the question?
It's more about people making mistake when they reach out to you on social media, dropping the deck. I know I have that all the time, and sometimes I have a look, sometimes I don't.
Yeah, I think, like, first and foremost, I've invested, distributed all of my angel funding as part of the angel program now. So I'm back to being a scout for now, which means I don't have any money to say yes to anybody on. So if anybody's thinking about sliding a deck in my DMs at any point, then you can, and I will point you in the right direction if I can. That's fine. But I can't give out 10 grand checks anymore because I've spent it all. But yeah, the one thing I think is, and I'm always hesitant on this, because my founder and my investor brain fight with each other on this, which is personalization. Because a cold outreach is something, when you know that investing often is a numbers game, you probably want to do as much of it as possible. If you're doing qualitative kind of approaches to every single person, you're taking a whole lot more time and the numbers game goes away. But you have to take the over under on it. And it's like, if I'm not going to respond to you because you're just sending the same, hello, potential investor, please like read this, blah, blah, blah. I'm still going to try and read it because I want to be a good guy.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just a really busy week. Whereas, excuse me, if someone goes, hey, Ash, saw you tweet about X game, software, whatever, we're building something that's better than that. Would love to show you at some time. Attach the pitch deck. Cool. And I guess one of the other bits that comes from that statement there is like short and sweet, you know. I'm busy. Other investors that have lots of money are naturally going to be incredibly busy. These people are reading these pitch decks and emails on the train, plane, toilet, probably. Like that's where they're reading these things.
Yeah.
And so you need to keep it short and sweet. And so if the email is this long, telling me about how you're going to change the world, that stuff should happen in the meeting.
Yeah.
The email is designed to get the meeting. And so the email should be, here's what I'm building. Here's why I think you'd be interested. Would love your thoughts on it. And actually, that's the final piece there, I think, is that asking for feedback initially is far easier to get to a conversation about, would you invest in this though, than, hi, I'd like your money. Like that's such an easy no from an email point of view. So those are probably the tips I would share on that.
I think that's a great way to end the interview. Thank you so much, Ash, for your time. Best way to reach out to you, Twitter maybe?
Twitter, yeah,
Okay.
I'm addicted. So it's just at @AsherFizzle with Zs on Twitter. You can find it via Dffrnt, which is at Dffrnt HQ, I believe, or Dffrnt
Yes,
underscore
that's-
HQ, whatever it is. And LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on there. So one of those would be fine.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks to
Thank you.
everyone joining us today, asking so many questions on the chat. The video will be available on my YouTube on Monday afternoon, where you can find all my previous AMAs. And thanks again to everyone supporting me via my Buy Me a Coffee page. That's really special thanks to you. And everyone, if you're not yet on the Discord, feel free to stop by because that's a great way to tell us more about what you are working on. You know, during the AMA, it's kind of just our guest plus, you know, some questions in the chat, but we don't really have the time to check out what you're building. So feel free to stop by, tell us more about that. And in the meantime, I wish you all a fantastic weekend ahead. Thanks everyone. Have a good day. Bye.